Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I am joined by Jack Birkenstock. Am I saying that right?
Completely correct. Kind of like the sandal shoe company. I just have a little switched vowel here and there. So
Yeah. Well, it's good you have a short first name.
yes, no, definitely it makes signatures easier.
Yeah.
When I just have to do the short burst because people are like, "What? How do you spell that name?" I've had broken stick. Just all kinds of. Childhood was fun, especially as a nerd and a gamer.
Yeah. I mean, so I have a last name that gets butchered and messed up a lot, but it's still short. So Friant, the spelling people have problems with.
I,
Uh,
I I would say it's probably less time for you to correct it than for me to correct it.
yeah.
Is probably the benefit, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Like we always get Frint and Friant, all the time based off of the spelling. But
Oh,
they have to inject the French into us. Friant.
yes. Yeah, I guess. Well, it's always odd to correct someone when it's a strictly Germanic pronunciation. People get kind of
Yeah.
it's Birkenstock. People are like,
Yeah.
all right, calm down. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to
Easy.
help you
Yeah.
spell it. Yeah, calm
Uh, I
down.
I gave up a long time ago. My wife always corrects people. So I mean, she's only into the game 20 years or so. After 30, you're like, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah, it's just say what you want to say. I
I
still
make
know who I am.
I make a big deal when someone says it correctly.
It's like, wait, do you know of us? Do you
Yeah.
know of the clan? No.
Yeah. How did that happen? So you were part of the Bodhana Group. Am I saying that correctly?
Technically it's Bodhana. We
Modona.
we always kind of say it's like the old Richie Valens song,
Uh,
Oh Donna. So we're Bodhana. It's actually a Sanskrit word that means leading to an awakening or an understanding. So it's very connected to the Bodhi tree and enlightenment. So the way that we kind of then explain that through is that our whole thrust as an organization is that we believe that through use of gaming, of tabletop, whether board or RPG, you can learn skills and develop and grow, learn a lot about yourself, without having to like kind of hit you over the head with the therapy hammer, as it were.
yeah.
So we'll make a character that's relevant, and the person plays through adventures that can help them practice social skills, or it could help them work on their anxiety or depression, as well as using the game as a vehicle for support as well.
Yeah. So I had first like encountered a concept like through two different ways. One was just one of our fans had a doctor prescribe them play more D&D. And they weren't someone that played D&D, but they understood that this person just needed more social interaction and the value of it for them.
Yep.
Although it might be, I don't know, some of the groups that I've been in, maybe a more controlled group is a better idea.
Yeah, no, it definitely can. Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
And then Dr. Megan Connolly's been on the show a few times as well. And
Nice.
and I found her through GM tips. She was on with Satine, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then we encountered each other like a year and a half ago or so, right?
Yeah. We because I think I had sent out an email because we were interested in the convention, and then we found out, just through that conversation of how many, those different avenues that we had, plus
Yeah.
another member of the one of the founders of Bodhana, one of our therapeutic GMs, he is a huge fan. So he was kind of like, "Oh my God, really? He answered you?" I was like, "Dude, he called me back like almost immediately. It was awesome.
Yeah,
It was great. We had an awesome talk."
you sent me an email with a phone number in it, and I did the unthinkable in this day and age. I called you. You're like, well, one, you answered, which is also surprising, in this day and age. And then you're like, you're calling me, and then because I'm definitely that guy that like, if something could have been a text, I'll probably call you.
No, it was, and yeah, I mean, the great, it was just a great conversation. And like I said, thank you for having me on. And like I said, Megan is wonderful through, clinical role, and she's a great GM and a great person,
And you're
great
on that
all
show
around.
as well. You're on the show, which is something that we discovered through that conversation. the connective tissue there.
Yep, I play the role of Baron Valdis, a ranger who in no way is based on someone with a very particular set of skills.
Yeah.
So, and I figure if Liam Neeson's going to be,
Mhm.
any kind of character, he's probably going to be a ranger. That's just kind of what I thought. That was my characterization there.
Have you seen the optional ranger options in Tasha's?
No, I have not gotten a chance to look over Tasha's yet as fully as I would like to.
They've basically rewritten the ranger, and the ranger went from being like okay, unless you're the Beastmaster, then it was meh, to being like it's weird. Like they're built in as a polyglot now, pretty much. Polyglot. I'm not sure how you say that. But then and then they also like they threw him some expertise and you can start. I think you can start with like 3 additional languages as a ranger.
Wow, so like the diplomat class now, where
Yeah, yeah,
I am well versed in binary moisture evaporators. It was like my second language. It's like
yeah, yeah. It's
wow.
also going to be like it's going to be the go-to class for a 1 level dip because you get a lot out of that.
Oh, see, I was thinking like when you're talking about like other, I'm still remembering like second edition where they
Yeah,
had like literally like, hey bro, I heard you like supplements,
yeah.
so we're gonna give you all these fighter kits and barbarian kits and ranger kits like with all
The
the different source books. Oh,
no, it just replaces like a lot of their standard abilities with better stuff.
okay, well, yeah, hey, definitely might be worth a trade off.
Yeah, yeah. I'm digging it. I
Nice.
like it. Um, so the only thing is, I think where people are going to be different, they're different than me. Is I like so basically their favorite enemy has been replaced with this ability called favorite foe, where it's basically a lesser version of Hunter's Mark that they just can kind of do.
Oh, so like it's more cantrip, less spell.
Well, it's
It,
not even that. It's like it does less damage, but it scales. You can only use it a certain amount of times, and then you can't move it, right? So to me,
oh,
I'm like Hunter's Mark is just better in my
oh,
opinion.
absolutely.
What I guess it removes the need to use a bonus action, right? So for the rangers that like that, um,
Okay.
I think even the initial use of it. But I actually like the favored enemy the way it is. I like the fact you just get kind of like a boost of skills versus this enemy, and you get the extra language.
It,
So I actually like that part.
right. Well, no, to me, if the way favored enemy, the way I've always kind of like viewed it in my mind is kind of like, Hawkeye, it's just like I'm like, okay, ka-sing to you, ka-sing to you, ka-sing to you. It's like a bow and arrow version of Equilibrium. If you ever saw that movie where I'm just,
Yeah.
going through as a ranger, just being able to jump it around. Oh,
But yeah, and
interesting.
then they replace primeval awareness with primal awareness, and I feel like I've rarely seen primeval awareness used, except for in the Curse of Strahd game that I'm playing in now. We have a couple rangers; they use it all the time, but it's like almost pointless because there's so much you ping stuff everywhere.
Right, literally, it just turns into white noise where
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
like, yeah, highlight this. Okay, that's like a flashbang grenade. That's like that's way too much. Way too much demonic
I think
around me.
I also think like if it's your favorite terrain, it's like a 6 mile radius, and like Barovia is not that big.
So it's literally everything.
You're like
Okay, well, yeah,
you use it. You're like, oh my god, they're everywhere.
yeah. My GPS is on the fritz. I can't
Yeah.
find out where to get anywhere. Oh my gosh, no, I've
Uh,
heard. I've heard a lot of good stuff about some of the things that are in Tasha's. So it's definitely on my to read list. Absolutely.
yeah. I feel like for us, it's like occupational requirement.
Oh
So
yeah, well, it's there's every job has required readings and
yeah.
trainings that you got to do. So keeping up on all the other just all the other lore in the books and like I want to be a turtle. What I'm sorry, what? I don't see that in my. Hold on, let me get that book.
So you guys had to go virtual with your convention this year.
Yeah,
Uh,
Yeah, Save Against Fear, which is our annual convention. Typically, it's the second week in October. We've been running it now 10 years, and with pandemic, we made the switch and we changed it from in person to online. And it was a good time. It was definitely easier to be able to control everything via Discord,
Yeah.
uh, with chat rooms and game rooms. But that's typically we do RPGs at that. We do our board game library of I think we're a little bit over 2,000 titles that we bring out every year when we run the con, but that's our major fundraiser that we run every year to help support our mission and what
So
we
was
do.
it still effective in that capacity?
Oh, absolutely. We actually over the last number of years, one of the things that we've been doing is we're very big on getting awareness and education out there, whether it be to communities and families about just board games in the home and how board games are not just like Monopoly and Parcheesi. You play
Yeah.
some awesome board games that teach great skills. But we also have been doing a lot of professional training because there's a lot of therapists out there, a lot of practitioners who want to use gaming in their practice, and they're one of the things that I always say to folks that, this isn't like I just grabbed the minds of Fandelver and I just run it for a bunch of kids and huzzah, they're better. That's not what this is. It's very much a perfect marriage of being a great facilitator and practitioner as well as being a great game master. Because,
When you say it
part
like that, it sounds like witchcraft.
it's well, I am in South Central Pennsylvania, so there,
Yeah.
I've had to have the talk of, so that's that devil game that you're playing. And I'm like, no, no, it's that's.
You
Sorry, that
okay?
my dog is in the background. We got a package. He gets
Okay.
a little bit kooky. I'm sorry about that,
Oh, no
folks.
worries. I have a dog
Uh,
as well that gets a little obnoxious at times.
yeah, a little bit. He's protecting me from the UPS man, which again, pandemic.
Yeah.
So it's every day at a certain time. Um, but yeah, having that explanation about so you're playing that devil game with my kids, like we still have that conversation with parents to this day, which is also why we don't just use D&D in our practice. We use Deadlands, we use Shadowrun, we use
Yo,
you
thank
know
you, evil.
Yep, no thank you, evil. Definitely, we use Pugmire. We,
Mm.
because this, I mean, different genres speak to different people. Not everybody likes fantasy.
You just need to
Um,
always have that game available. So they're like that devil game, and you hold up. No, thank you, evil.
yeah, he's yeah, there's horns in there too, sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's about creating a compelling story that's going to immerse the player as client, and then making your stories relevant to what skills you want to work on. So if you're working on someone speaking up in their own voice, you might build more diplomacy into your adventure, or you might build more if it's for attention and focus. You might build a lot of quest mechanics in that, like, well, you have to do this in this order. Well, I can't write it down, so now the person has to like really pay attention so they can remember it. So there's different creative ways to help people work on skills in the game, but it's also about making sure that one of the phrases we use is you don't stretch the therapy to fit the game, you stretch the game to fit the therapy. So it's first and foremost, we're doing this with intention, we're doing this with a purpose. So you have to be good on what your clinical skills are first,
Mhm.
but then you make a fun game that allows for more immersion into learning those skills. So it's a very sophisticated model to doing this kind of work. So like I said, we offer trainings for professionals and we offer consultation for companies and people wanting to do this. And that's grown our audience over the last number of years. Like the first year we trained, I think, 8 clinicians at our event. And this past year we trained like almost 30 people. And we had over 60 therapists in attendance at the event, which is awesome because now we're getting professionals to talk and we're sharing stories and applications and new environments of and with new groups of people that we can use this with. So it's been fascinating, and Save's always been that though for us, because we actually started going onto the gaming path at our first save where Rich Thomas, who formerly creative director of White Wolf and obviously Onyx Path Publishing, Rich actually attended our first Save Against Fear, and here I am, like I'm like, oh my god, vampires! Rich is here,
Yeah.
and but we talked about people over the years who have been sending letters in to White Wolf and Onyx talking about how they've been working through trauma through playing in the game, and we are like, wait a minute, these are people doing this without the benefit of a therapeutic direction. So what if we could take this and we could be more skillful in the way that we apply and create these stories? We could really make a difference in the lives of a lot of people, you know? So we started to, and that kind of set us on our road. And now Rich is a member of our board, and, you know, we've just grown so much since that
Yeah.
point.
I see that like people just doing it on their own. I see like two problems with that. One is like they're just kind of feeling their way through it and they're not professionals, they're not being guided by a professional. And two is they're potentially, you know, thrusting their therapy upon the rest of the group,
It,
which may not always be a good thing.
Yeah, no, it can be problematic. I mean, one of the things that we started with, and a lot of our talking points when we go to like conventions and stuff is, you know, we think about the characters that we've played over the years, you know, and like, you know, when I was a kid, when I was a teen, playing like, you know, Marvel TSR and, you know, Ghostbusters and stuff, you know, it was wish fulfillment. I was a kid, I was a teen, I was just being goofy, you know. But as I've gotten older, I've started to play characters with more nuance and with more substance and deeper plot lines and more emotional interplay. And so we always get something out of, I think, what we play, depending
Mhm.
on why we're playing it. But you're right, there is definitely something to be said of, you know, personal growth versus therapeutic growth. Totally different animals. You know what I mean? Totally different animals.
So, are you guys still? Would you say you're still kind of like pioneers in this method of therapy?
I I don't know. I'm always like I try to be Mr. Humble about it, like because we're not the only ones doing it. We certainly weren't the first ones to think of role playing and characterization. I mean, even the whole geek therapy movement, the whole idea of talking to someone in a session about what they're into. You know, this isn't new. You know, I would say that uh, I would say we're pioneering in the way of talking about the sophistication of the model, that it's not just playing for fun is beneficial, because it still is, right? I mean, there's so many weeks where, you know, I'm Jack for 40 hours that week, and sometimes I'm Jack for 60 hours in a week, and I just don't want to be Jack for a while. So, you know, I'll dump into Shadowrun, or I'll dump into, you know, whatever adventure I'm playing. it, I think that the pioneering comes in where we really are looking at the applications of the hobby and what are the safeguards of what to do, what not to do. Like talking about things like consent mechanics and safety tools, you know, utilize, like we recommend, not only to use those in a therapeutic application, but also if you're using it in your home game. Safety tools are a great thing at the table, and it's not how most people look at it as it's censorship. You're shutting down my story. Well, actually, most safety tools build in something of what's cool and what did we like about the adventure, so it actually can help you take your table to another level of, well, if everybody's gigging to the content and everybody's into it and everybody feels safe, you just have so much more vibrant adventures that you can tell and be more creative with the stories that you're presenting. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes people fail to recognize your freedoms and liberties end at somebody where someone else's begin. Otherwise, you just have anarchy.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because yes, there were, I would have to say, when I was younger, I mean, yeah, were there a lot of like, you know, juvenile humor in the games that I was playing? Yes, that's where I was developmentally. But, you know, knowing that I mean, I'm glad that as a culture, we're talking about things like trauma and triggering and, you know, people having emotional responses, and it's being more cognizant of other people. You know, other people are important too. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just me in this world walking around. You know, I have other humans, you know, albeit we're isolated from each other, but that doesn't mean that, you know, we aren't having a connection right now that is important to be respectful of you as much as I want respect towards myself. And again, safety tools are a very, very important thing, because we're getting to another I think another level in gaming. So
Yeah, I mean, we're starting, and also like we're kind of like growing and maturing as people. Well, some of us are anyway, in the sense that we don't carry all of our wounds and injuries on the outside, right?
right.
Which is hard. Which is hard. I get, for when it comes to mental health because you can't see it, right? Like if someone
Yeah,
cuts off their finger, like it's very visible, they don't have that anymore, or you can
correct.
see scars, and you can for whatever reason that's just easier to relate to and understand.
Well, and it's a weird thing because even if you talk about like I may be okay with something tonight in a game, but maybe
Mm-hmm.
next week, what if next week as opposed to tonight, let's just like I lost my father about, 25 years ago. There are most days where he doesn't come into my memory, you know, but there are other days where he's very much in my memory. And it's the holidays. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
very like easily understood example, right? So part of safety tools is maybe one night you're into certain level of content. Maybe another night you're just not into it. And that's just being a good friend. That's just being good at the table to just be like, okay, maybe tonight we're not going to play 10 candles.
Right.
Maybe we're not going to do something ultra deep that's like full of emotion, because I think part of it with consent tools, it also gets misunderstood is a lot of people are like, well, xcard just shuts it all down. Well, there's different tools, and even that I don't think was the original intent. The
Yeah.
original intent is if we have a culture amongst friends where we understand that there may be problems, it's being respectful to that person and just saying, okay, I totally understand that was a little bit above the line or beyond where we felt comfortable going. Let's just pull it back so everybody can continue to have a good time. Because even mentioning that is huge for some people. Just saying I'm uncomfortable could be an important step for that person. You know what I mean? So it's actually when people are open to discuss things like, maybe the representation of the police in the game might be triggering to a person of color. That's an important thing to keep in mind, especially in the climate that we're in right now. Like that's not where you're shutting down my story. Well,
Yeah.
tell a different story. I had a game of Shadowrun where, and this was just a home game where I had the whole thing of like it was an animal fighting ring. And one of my players, very big animal lover, was like, yeah, I'm really not comfortable with that. And it wasn't the old school. And this is even before we were starting to talk about safety tools and stuff. It wasn't, well, this is my story. And like, oh, come on, get over it. We just, you're doing black ops work. What are you trying to judge? Whatever. It was more like, oh, okay. So they run drugs now. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, quick change, perfectly easy. You know what I mean? It not that big of a deal if you're on the creative.
The tools have also gotten a lot more sophisticated as well.
Oh,
You-
absolutely.
yeah, there's like there's gradations, there's blinds and veils of that you can use that has kind of that in it. I think is it.
Script change is one of the most sophisticated I've seen. That's from Bo Sheldon. And with this one, it pretty much it's like it's a VCR remote control. It's like, so you have play, pause, fast forward, rewind.
Mhm.
But there's also some very interesting things that he designed for the system, which are things like instant replay, which is if there was a really cool moment in the game, let's instant replay that, which doesn't sound much like a safety mechanic, but your players are telling you what they thought was awesome. So now as a GM, you know that if you include more content like that, it's going to heighten the excitement level of your game, but you're also at the same time avoiding problematic content. So you're celebrating highlight moments, and you even could have like a highlight reel at the end of the session. And we've all done that, right? Like on the back of the porch of whoever you're playing the game at's house, where you're all like, hey, it was really cool. Then when blah, 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 and that deck run it was really exciting. So some of the nuance in that actually increases the enjoyment at the table, which is awesome because it develops that communication and that comfort level. So yeah, there's been a lot of sophistication with safety tools and consent.
So did you? part of me wants to.
Oh, I'm sensing this is one of those hardball. Are you going to give me a Chris Matthews hardball question? I love it. No.
No, more or less, I'm just gonna be a jackass. No, convince me. You just work hard up for a D&D group, and you're like, I got it. Therapy groups. There's already a group of people together. And all of a sudden, it's
Ah.
like Cavalier, Ranger, Acrobat.
Uh, it, no, it's weird. The whole going back, because there is actually a lot of tendency. A lot of people make a somewhat of a similar criticism, where people are like, "Yeah, come on, talking about therapeutic video games and geek therapy and all this. Aren't you just trying to like validate your hobby? Like, isn't that really what you're trying to do?" And I go, "Well, part of it might be. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's maybe a subconscious. I mean, because I'm old enough to remember getting stuffed in lockers because I played D&D, or I had friends that had to burn, whose moms burned their books because they were devil games. So I think there is some validation that goes on with it. But one of the things that we made sure to do is, like I said with Rich, and 10 years ago at our first save was when we started to look at this as a possible therapeutic,
Mhm.
because we had played D&D with like kids in residential settings that we had all worked together at, and that was mostly like we weren't playing for therapy at that point. We were playing funsies D&D on the weekends with kids, because
Yeah.
it's hard to fill a 16-hour shift in a residential facility, right? But we started to see the kids not getting into trouble, kids picking each other up like, "Yo man, we need you on Saturday for the adventure. We need our healer, so don't get off level. Like, we need you to play." And we were like, "Okay, that's cool. It's motivating good behavior. They're looking out for each other, so they're acting like a party now." But when we first started looking at all this, one of the big things that we made sure of is that we examined it before we even got to table, before we even talked about running any groups. We were purely theoretical with this for about a good 4 years, where we went in and we looked at all kinds of different modalities, and we really started to say, okay, what did the game mean to us when we were growing up? And we started, like me, I used the game primarily for escape when I was young, because my parents are going through a bitter divorce, and there's a lot of like, blah, just going on in the house. So it was crazy time, right? When I was young. And I found solace, but at the same time, I was started analyzing. I was actually, believe it or not, I was a bit of a shy child when I was a kid. I didn't speak up very much. I kind of kept to myself. Um, and through playing the game, I started to play different types of characters, and I started to explore different facets of personality. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but as I looked back on it, and then we compared with other founder stories about people using one of our founders, his mother passed away from cancer when he was very young. So he was using the game, and it was solace for grief. So we're like, okay, what could be some of the applications? We may lose a character in games. So, hey, maybe we could use it. And a lot of it initially was just us going, hey, what if this? Well, that kind of correlates back to like CBT work, cognitive behavioral therapy, or this looks kind of like rational emotive behavioral therapy or psychodrama. So we started to see connections to other forms of therapy and techniques that were used that we could use the game to replicate. So we could use the game as it's less a modality, and it's more of a communication strategy. The game is what we use to deliver all of those other things that you might find in a typical group. And we also use the strength of group mechanics. Groups forever, we talk about Bruce Tuckman and, the whole storming, forming, norming. If you've ever been to a corporate training, you've learned about it. That any group that gets together has conflict, and conflict is okay, because conflict teaches us things. So part of it is maybe bringing up inner conflict when something happens at the table that's uncomfortable. Let's talk about why it was uncomfortable. That's not a bad thing to shy away from. That's important.
If addressed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It,
Doug brings up something that makes me apprehensive about RPGs as therapy is outside of explicit situation. I feel like people are expecting a GM to be skilled in psychology. There is actually one of the virtual cons had an event, and it was basically, gaming as therapy. But I don't think anyone was a professional that was on the panel, right?
yeah.
And like whenever we've talked about this, because it's come up, and we even have a buddy that's like, I need to get something. I've had a bad week. I need to distress. Let's kill shit. Um, You know, and like the kind of the thing that we say, disclaimer we throw out there whenever we talk about any of this stuff, it's like, hey, we are not professionals. Don't listen to anything we say in a clinical capacity because you will die. Go seek out professionals. And then like these are just our opinions, right?
Right. No, I definitely agree that there is a danger in specifically, because when we define, and one of the ways that we break down is that we talk about therapeutic benefit. And in Bodhana, one of the ways that we describe this to folks is there is mainline therapeutic benefit, which is as simple as, I play a video game for 3 hours and it relaxes me. I play cards with buddies. I play a board game with buddies. I play RPG with buddies, and it's relaxing. It's no different than a vacation. Take that 80s escapism is bad. But when we then talk about there is clinically therapeutic, there's a difference, because there are things that are therapeutic that are relaxing, then they're engaging, they help us unwind, they help us calm down, whether it's, anything, reading a book, whatever, just taking a moment, meditating, that's therapeutic. But clinically beneficial is when you have a trained therapist, an experienced therapist who knows about, like myself, I've been in the human services field for about 24 years. I've been running groups for about 20 of those years. I've worked in inner city classrooms. I've worked with kids with anything from autism to obsessive compulsive disorders. And, I've worked with a ton of different clients. Don't do therapy if you are not trained to do therapy. And at the same time, this model doesn't work for everybody. Like, this is not a panacea. This is not a catch-all like, well, this person has anxiety, have them play D&D. Well, first of all, not everyone likes role-playing. Second, sometimes there is a bit of buy-in that comes into this process of, it's when we talk about like willing suspension of disbelief. Some of them of the pinnacles to the model is that it works because that person is allowed to experience at their level of investment or immersion. Because some people need therapy that's much more clearly defined and much more intensive, that RPG just isn't going to cut it on its own. So if you're talking about someone with like severe anxiety, you're talking about someone with severe depression, we also just define this is not necessarily a standalone modality, depending on what the nature of the person's mental health issue is. Now, if you're talking skill building, that's a little different. We're talking about developing good social skills, cooperation, collaboration, communication. That very easily could be beneficial just through role playing. With a little bit of direction, maybe we set more challenges up that kind of gear a person toward, either rehearsal, practice, demonstration, or even exposure to those types of skills. That's still different than if I'm a person with anxiety. I need anxiety-focused treatment that maybe is aided or reinforced by playing around the table with people. And part of the challenge with that is making sure that the clinician is being very judicious about, like, one of the questions that we ask all the time, every session, constantly through the session, is this good for the game or is this good for the client? If it's both, it's awesome. But if it isn't good for the client in any level, then we're not doing our job. And it's because it's easy. Like, we've all been at that table where we're like, holy crap, it's 3 hours later. Where the heck did my Friday go? Because it was such an awesome session. We have 2 hours to do a session on average. We can't let ourselves go too far necessarily into the fabric of an awesome game if it's not necessarily benefiting the client therapeutically, because then a parent's just paying me to play games with their kid. And I'm not offering therapy. And we have to be very cognizant about that, because if you're not good at policing yourself, you can very easily run afoul of this. Like I said, the balance of clinician and game master is a very fine line that you must be attentive to that.
Does amongst the community, do you know who started like running games like this as therapy?
No. I know. Oh my gosh. And this is probably about like 5 or 6 years ago. I remember when we were first kind of, making more of our presence known in the online community. I know that in terms of organizations, there's essentially outside of like independent practitioners and people kind of operating, I know that there's three main ones. If I'd have to actually attribute any of this to one person who is like doing it before the rest of us, it would probably be Hawk Robinson from RPG Research. Hawk is a phenomenal researcher, a phenomenal guy. He's in Spokane, Washington,
Mhm.
and his website, RPG Research, like he's been doing this for like 20 years. He's been researching this because, I
Oh,
mean,
that's a full study at that point, right?
absolutely. Because even going all the way back, we could talk about organizations like Car PGA, who back in the midst of the Satanic Panic, when we were writing all these different, finding all these articles, and we had Patricia Pulling and bothered about Dungeons and Dragons and, all this negative press. You had organizations and people even back then who were saying, no, wait, hold on. Studies actually show that people who play role-playing games are probably better adjusted. They're not, it's amazing that stereotype of, isolated misanthropes living in their parents' basement was allowed to live as long as it was, because most people playing D&D were actually more comfortable with who they were, and they're very social. They just didn't want to hang out with jerks. They wanted to hang out with people that like the same thing they do. So no, they're not isolating, they're just not hanging out with you. Like,
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we kind of learned. So in terms of it being more widespread, I know that Adam Davis and Adam Johns from Game to Grow, like we started talking, about 5 or so years ago, and we were kind of like, "Oh, you're doing this too? Yeah, we're East Coast, you're West Coast. Interesting. Have you talked to Hawk? Yeah, I've talked to Hawk. Oh, wow. So like those are kind of the primary three at this point, doing the RPG work and being vocal about it. There's a lot of professionals doing this. And my biggest wish is I never can say to another professional, I can advise, because I got a lot of people calling. This is the new hotness, right? They're reading about it online. They're saying, I want to run D&D therapy. And my first question always is, you ever played a role-playing game? Well, not really, but I've read about it. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Not until you understand what it's like to play a role-playing game. Like, that's
Yeah.
integral to this. But people are like, well, I'm a great therapist. Well, that's awesome, but that doesn't tell me you're a great GM. And that's a part of the model. So I can't tell someone they can, but I recommend, people should usually get experience running. Like, go and run at a convention, go and run at a local game store. Don't just run for your friends and family, because you're not going to be dealing with conflict at the table as much as you might be in another setting, or, learn more than just one system, in case the kids that you're working with don't like fantasy. So D&D may not be the one for them. There's a lot of considerations. And one of the big things that we advocate at Bodhana is we want professionals to talk and communicate with each other, so we can learn what each other is doing. That's best practice approach in any therapeutic sense. We got to find out what everybody's doing so we can talk about what works, what
Yeah.
doesn't work, and what safeguards there are, because there are people that won't gel to this method. And there are some people, like, if you truthfully can't distinguish between fantasy and reality, I would not recommend role playing necessarily for that person. That's a risk.
I suspect that it takes quite a bit of experience in both for them to intersect properly, right? My thought, like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
imagine someone new as a clinician, but experienced at the game, run the risk, like you said, of falling too much into the game side of things, not
Oh,
having
yeah.
enough of the other kind of experience to back them up.
Well, yeah, because it's one of those things that it's one of those like false success paradigms that we talk about sometimes, or like you get like a false positive result when you're doing something like, oh, the kids are smiling, they're laughing, they're gigging, it's great. They're learning, they're getting better. How do you know they're getting better? Just having a good time at the table doesn't mean, because one of the things also about therapy is true therapy and therapeutic growth happens outside of session. The whole goal of any practitioner should be to discharge their client from the date of admission. Your goal is for that person to not need you anymore. So what we should focus on and what we focus on is, what is this person doing in between sessions? Because I know what you're doing in the game. That's pretty easy. Here's the thing, find the thing or fight the thing or protect the thing or whatever the quest is, right?
Mhm.
But if our goal is social skills, we're checking in with the parent. We're maybe checking in with the school to see, is this person now engaging with others more? Are they doing it independently, or is it being parent driven or peer driven? Is that person better dealing with emotional problems? Because it's easy to work through a breakdown when the therapist is right there. But is that person learning and applying the skill outside of the session? We have to track these because that validates that what we're doing is actually beneficial, because that's the other part of it, like math class, show your work. We have to show that it's not, again, it's not just playing a game, everybody's smiling and laughing. So that's great therapy. Great therapy promotes change.
And that's that's a caveat to like most things in life too, right? Like,
Pretty much, yeah.
just because there's not a good, just because there's good benefits, are you getting the specific benefit you were initially going after?
Right. Yeah, well, that's the sophistication of the model that,
Yeah.
I actually had a professional call me once and said, where are the therapy modules? And I went, I give up. Where are they? And the person was like, well, what do you mean? What are you being, smart ass or something like that? I was like, no, not being that at all. I was like, our modules are crafted and our adventures are crafted around the needs of the players at the table. So if I have 5 kids with social skills that are in my group, I'm going to base my adventure mostly around social skills and group challenges, what they want to learn. So there is no module at
You,
this point.
you don't know what the
you know
configuration is going to be. How could you have a module
yeah,
for it?
exactly. And then you also base changes in the adventure based on how the person's either growing or not growing, or do they need a more intense challenge? Then we can kind of build that in, or we put the intense challenge to find out where the glass ceiling is for that person. Lot of very, very intricate work goes into how we create, implement, facilitate, review, rewrite, change, all of this stuff. Like, there's a lot of smart design
Mhm.
to therapeutic role playing. It's just not something you can pick up from out of nowhere. And again, we offer trainings, but we're by no means the only model that's out there. But we are an approach. Our approach is that the narrative drives most of the therapy. The story is where it's at, because when you're into that story and engaging in that story, that's where your challenges are. So we're very much on content creation, use of storytelling, narrative, thematic devices like tension and pacing. All that stuff is very important. If I'm working with someone with anxiety, maybe we'll play a game of Dread, because there's nothing more anxiety provoking than playing a game that's based off a Jenga tower resolution, right?
Yeah.
But before we play that game, we're going to talk about how people know their anxiety presents, what their triggers are, what their coping skills and mechanisms are. So then we're going to use that enhancement activity. We're going to generate anxiety, then practice the skills as we're playing to bring the person back down. That's a very targeted application that requires careful observation. Would I run that right now? No, because it's all online facilitation at the moment. So that's not something we recommend online.
Yeah.
There's also other safeguards, and it's based around what your experience and your training is. Like I said, I've done a lot of work with kids and teens. Most of my work's with teenage and child mental health, as well as either victims of or perpetrators of sexual abuse. That I've worked for 20 years in that field. So that's another area that I can focus very exclusively on. Have I ever worked with PTSD vets? Nope, wouldn't touch it. Why? Because I never have. I wouldn't want to do damage. I have a lot of theories and a lot of ideas. But again, if someone calls and says, can you work with veterans? Nope, but you can talk to Dr. Megan Connell. She could definitely work with veterans with PTSD. Why? She's a veteran herself, and she has worked in that domain. So referrals, same as in any other mental health. If I'm not the right guy, I'm going to recommend you to the person that is the best choice for that. That's ethics.
So now, like, I have two different questions that spring up
Uh-oh.
based off some of the things. So one, as as someone who's been playing the hobby for a long time, it always comes up. Inevitably, you have to kick. Someone has to be kicked from a group at some point or another for different reasons, right? So what happens, or has it happened, where you put together a group, you think this is going to be good for everybody, and then you turn out you have someone who's in it and they're enjoying it, and the game part is good for them, but you realize the therapy part isn't.
No, that actually has happened. And we definitely, well, we make sure as with any other kind of intervention, we in our case, if it's like a kids group, we want to make sure definitely the parents involved as part of that conversation. Get, hey, yes, we're enjoying the game, but we one of the big processes that we do is when we have an intake, we have a specialized intake process. So we do ask all the standard questions everybody else does. You know, what's your diagnosis? Do you take meds? How long have you been having this issue? What have you? But we also ask a ton of questions based around what goals do you want to work on? What types of adventures would you like to be involved in? Like, do you want puzzles? Do you want exploration? Do you want fighting? And we're very attentive to that information we get on the outset,
Mm-hmm.
because if a person's, oh, I want just fighting, just nothing but fighting. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in that, because that's one very small aspect of everything. Then as we go through the game and we talk about, well, here was the goal that you picked, and we don't really see that you're working through the goal. What's up? Let's talk about this. And we talk to the parent, go, we don't want to discharge anyone unnecessarily, but we really don't think that your child is working towards the goals. Maybe the modality is not the right thing for them. We've also tried with some groups changing the facilitator, because one of the first questions of any group first is the content correct? Is the facilitator correct? Are we doing it properly is the first question. And you should always ask that if you're a facilitator of any kind of therapy. Is it me? That's the first question we ask. But we have had to have talks where, these are our goals. So maybe with this person, we're going to set maybe a more fine-tuned benchmark. And then if we don't see the growth towards that, we have had to say, I don't think this is the right form of therapy. We're going to make a referral for you. The person's just not getting what they're getting out of it. Another is sometimes we move people from group to group because maybe just the personalities are conflicting. So now that one person maybe is affecting the rest of the group, which is not a terribly uncommon practice as well. Yeah, it's usually monitoring it,
That's
discussing, and just keeping up on it.
it's actually fairly common outside of therapy. So
Oh, to a large degree, yeah. I mean, it's come on, dude. Like you're bringing the game down. It's one of
yeah.
those kind of like, can we work together as a team? But again, with the process that we're on, it's mainly going back and talking about what was the initial reason you came to group. Which again, if you talk about session zero and a standard thing, which we also use session zero, what are we here for? And with some groups, particularly younger kid groups, they need a little bit more focus sometimes. So we might go over the rules and the expectations. We might have more intense clinical conversation or goal oriented conversation with some of those groups to kind of help bring them back on track. So there's a lot of different interventions that again are all kind of part of what we do in just standard group that we just bring into it, and it's just individualizing the approach as much as the content.
So the other thing I thought about when you mentioned dread, I was like, so what is more anxiety inducing, 10 candles or dread?
Oh, I don't know. That's a tough one. It really, I think, depends on how you play 10 candles. Cause I played a session of 10 candles with Ian Muller from Gehenna Gaming. And that turned out to be it was creepy, but it definitely was not a psychological tour de force. It was
Yeah.
it was very tongue in cheek. It was like an over the top, like a Robert Rodriguez film or like a Tarantino thing. It was very over the top. I think that dread in some ways, I think is more anxiety producing because it's a physical anxiety. Like it's the tension of the resolution mechanic itself.
Yeah.
And just the way that the more difficult the thing you're doing, the more blocks or the more difficult block you'd have to remove, it's just such a great way to explain anxiety and taking a risk. So I think in terms of creating anxiety, I think that's more terrifying personally, just because you had that tension just in a regular game. Like, you know what I mean? So I think that that could really bear that out, because then you don't kind of have to necessarily talk about the tension. The mechanic creates the tension. You just direct, and much like when you use the, I forget the term that they use in Dread, where you create like your initial questions that you want to answer throughout the session. Um, I think that that creates more than its own fair share of tension, just the blocks in the tower itself.
I guess that yeah, there's still the unknown. Like you don't know that your pulls are going to work. Because in theory, if someone was good enough, couldn't the Dread Tower exist forever? Right? If someone was so skilled, they could always pull the block. But where with the 10 candles, it's inevitable, right? The last candle
Right.
will go out.
Yeah, there is definitely tension, and I think that definitely depends on one, the way that you run it, because I mean, 10 candles is a fascinating system, especially with that. I love anything that has like that diminishing
Yeah.
economic, or that diminishing, like if you're playing patchwork, you have less places you could put stuff in, or tiny towns. But yeah, psychologically, as you're getting down and you have less and less, because you see one of two things: either the person gets more conscientious of their choices, or someone just goes complete balls to the wall. Hey, it's whatever, guns a blazing, like
We're gonna die anyway.
yeah, the
Yeah.
last 15 minutes of an action film.
Yeah. So what was your like the impetus for you to start doing this? Like how did you just go from being I guess your stereotypical clinician to being like, all right, we're going to start implementing games.
It really was that initial conversation with Rich at Save, and he usually, Rich tries to go, nah, don't, yeah, it's not me, it's you, and I'm like, no, sincerely, that that kind of aha, clouds part, sun shines down moment, where I was talking to him about all these, therapeutic benefits that people had gotten, and and it just was a snap in my mind where I was like, huh. Well,
What if
gaming's
we could
pretty
steer
good.
that?
Yeah, what if we could take that aha moment that people have, and again, it's not unique to role playing. It's, people get inspired by movies and book characters and TV characters, and people get inspired because there's a connection, and there's like this moment where you go, yeah, that's me. And I think with role playing, you have the opportunity, because anything that we create contains a portion of ourself. So any creation, you are part parent. So there's a part of you there. As much as you acknowledge it, or however it's silly, or it's serious, or whatever, there's always a part of you in everything you create. So if we acknowledge and we identify why we create what we create, and why that's important to us, what it means to us, we can intentionalize, if that's even a word. Well, it is now. We can make those decisions with intention, and we can play through and then talk about what those moments meant. So it was really when we started to analyze it beyond just, yeah, it was great on the unit and it kept the kids from acting out because they wanted to play D&D in the weekend. There were vestiges of benefit in the model back then, but it really was when we started analyzing our own gaming hobby and how it had changed over the years as we changed. We really then started to compare it to other models. And when we talked, then again, through Save Against Fear, we talked to more people over the years with now this idea of, what did your character bring to you over the years? And people started sharing stories about self-discovery through character exploration. And then we were like, wait a second, we really got something here, you know? So that really is what kind of primed it to be more than just a good idea, into something that when we found people were into this and that they had had their own personal moments of growth, it really accelerated the development of this into a level. And then just meeting more professionals made the conversations more meaningful in that aspect. So it's just been kind of like this snowball.
So when you play for fun, are you able to turn off the clinician?
Yes. Very, very. I make a concerted effort to kind of turn that off. I mean, to some degree, you kind of can't turn off being a clinician in a way. I mean, there's when I do it for pay, but like that mind of
Yeah.
like, you all right tonight? Like, like I can't turn off that spidey sense, if you will,
Your
that,
friends aren't like, God damn it, are you trying to fix me? I know you're trying to fix me.
no, that's no, that's a great question. That's probably
Yeah.
the biggest one that I'm trying to avoid. I don't want people to think I'm trying to treat them.
Mhm.
So, it's not like, oh, interesting choice that you've made tonight in our Kids on Bikes adventure. Would you like to tell me some more about this?
Yeah, yeah,
Why is your character interacting in this way? So I don't want to be accused of that or even thought, because there might be some nervousness around the table of like, is
yeah.
Jack going to therapize me today? So no, just I think keeping cognizant of that, which again, it's kind of a reverse, of in that instance, is it good for the game as opposed to is it good for the client? There is no client, so I focus more on the game.
Right. So in the
Good
end time,
question.
in the yeah, that was definitely more tongue in cheek.
Oh, absolutely.
In the end times here, you find yourself gaming more, less, or the same.
Man, I tell you what, since I have not gamed this much since I was a high school student. Like it even borders on some of my college gaming. Like I actually normally with like work and having to like drive and commute to my job and stuff like that, like took a lot of hours out of the panache. I'm actually engaged in far more games, whether it be online, just online board games, online role playing games. We actually were just playing every Thursday. One weekend is or 1 week is a Deadlands Reloaded, using the Savage Worlds engine, and then on opposite weeks we play Conan from Odysseus, and then we're looking at starting a Kids on Brooms campaign, and it's just like, yeah, I haven't played in 3 different campaigns in a week since I was like 16. Like this is
Yeah,
crazy pants, but I'm loving it because it's just easier now to game with folks online. I mean, it can, there's the risk of, spending 16 hours in front of the computer every day. But yeah, my gaming hobby, I still enjoy it, even though I do it for a job. I still enjoy my private play just as much as I did before, probably even more so because now I don't have to work while I'm doing it. It's
yeah.
it's true release. So I've actually found I dive more into character, and it's especially with my play on Clinical Role with Megan and everyone. So
So you're playing Deadlands Reloaded, 5e on Clinical Role. What's the other game?
Conan from Modiphius.
Oh, is that the 2d20s?
Yeah, it's actually because I played the Star Trek Adventures from
Mm-hmm.
Modiphius. I played Conan, and I have to say, having played both systems, they definitely do a good job, even though the rules are the same. Like, well, basically the same, capturing the flavor. Even though I'm not a fan of the property, I'm interested in the upcoming Dune,
Okay.
which has been very talked about. I mean, because get that sucker to the table. That's a complex like world to dive into.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, those are my 3 mains. And like I said, we're looking at starting a Kids on Brooms campaign. Bodhana is currently in the midst of a research project with local university to study the benefits of role playing towards social anxiety, which could not have come at a better time. So yeah, I probably game at this point between groups and private. I probably game about maybe 20 hours a week
That's a lot of
on
gaming.
average now. Yeah, but it's good. It's
Yeah.
it's definitely it's definitely not where I thought I would be when I was 16 or 17, and my parents told me my hobby was a waste of time. Definitely in a different era, but it's not even like a see told you. It's more like a this is nice.
Yeah.
This is nice. We're helping people. We're having fun. We're also introducing kids to games. So when they're done with our group, they can take all of their knowledge and their experience now role playing, and they could develop their own set of friends for life within the gaming hobby. And that makes me feel good when I hear kids, yeah, I'm running D&D for kids in college now, man. It was awesome. That's great. you know
Do you guys keep in touch to know like how many people actually stick with the hobby?
With some of our folks, we do. We actually, it's interesting. One young man who was with our group for a little over a year, he graduated from the group when he went off to college, and he's actually exploring RPG as therapy. Like he's doing reports and presentations on it in college.
Uh,
So it's just like, oh, that's awesome. Like, so yeah, from time to time, we'll hear back from folks that have been in our groups about how they're doing, and some of them pick it up. We've kind of, lit the candle, as it were, for a lot of folks, which is, again, to me, that's one of the greatest feelings. If you talk about someone who's isolated, doesn't really have a friend group and whatnot, that person then goes on to, embrace the hobby, because now you don't need the security of the group. We take kids from group and we say, well, now that you've learned how to play D&D, or you've learned how to play whatever, go start your own home group. That's your assignment. Your assignment is to teach this game to one other friend. And now they get another friend involved, and they get another friend involved. And before you know it, they're now playing and running their own system. Because that's another thing we do with groups as well, is we take times where the clients practice running the adventure and we take the part of player. So now you're talking about teaching people reflective listening skills, and how to listen to a crowd and to read their audience at the table, like higher level skills that they can do just running a fun adventure, but they're still skill building.
mhm.
So it's another level. And yeah, it's so great.
Have you ever caught anyone trying to sneak into your games under the guise of therapy, but they just want a regular D&D group?
Yes. We have had some folks who are like, man, can't we just kill stuff? Can't we just like go and hack and slash? And I go, not really, because that's not what we're here for. And I break a couple of hearts when I talk like that. But
Yeah,
again, it's like, no, occasionally we're going to get into some scraps. Well, it's some combat. Like it's not, I'm not running, 18 sessions without combat. But I also know economy wise, combat can take a long time in some
yeah.
systems. So if 2 hours of my session is just combat, I need to have some moments in there to make sure that there's still some therapeutic benefit, you know. So it's a tough waggle back and forth, but again, being able to manage the table and to manage a group, those are skills that I love, having picked up a lot of those skills over the years, just how to be able to, like, okay, you're sliding a little back. How do I bring you in? How do I bring you in? Or, if you're dissatisfied, how do I keep you interested with, what's happening? Because not everyone likes combat. Not everyone likes diplomacy. We have games like that where, you have one person who really wants to portray their character and enhance that creative side. So they're so into play and drama, and the other person like, can I just hit a thing with a sword? And we're like, well, right now we don't really know who we need to hit. We have to talk to the person to find out where
Yeah,
we need to go. So who are you going to hit? You're going to attack the bartender? They'll never serve you again. Like, why would you do that?
yeah,
So even that, just addressing those questions in the game is therapeutic, because what actually my favorite, I don't know how much time we have here. My favorite recent was, we had this adventure where it was their first combat in Pugmire, and we were teaching them the system rules, and they had this group of bandits who were rats and cats, and they defeated them pretty soundly. But then afterwards, the kids were doing like the typical, like, tell us everything we want to know or we'll kill you. And I was like, okay, that's a bit over the top. But so what I did was I turned the rat into this like comically over exaggerated pointer outer of facts.
uh-huh.
So he was just like, all right, dude, you just beat me and my friends up. You don't need the sword for me to tell you stuff, okay? I think you're going a little overboard. It's like, well, we're going to tie you up, and if you lie, we'll kill you. You don't know what I know, so how would you know if I'm lying to you? What? Does he have too much coffee? Like, it just like speaking to the rest of the group, and the group's like, dude, relax, calm down. And
Yeah,
he's like, well, no, I want to get to the information. And then I just kind of sat back, and since I had created that window of opportunity, the group was kind of like, look, we got to, people are following us. We're on a quest. So can we just chill out and not kill everything that moves while we're going across the countryside? therapeutic moment. They decided that they were a diplomatic group and a democratic group. We
Yeah.
vote on how to handle prisoners in this group. And I went, that's something I've very rarely heard in a D&D game, that we're going to vote on what we do with our victories.
Well, it's sound and it's good. Like you said, they're kind of doing it. So I did actually have another question, but you just asked. Like, I don't know how much time we have left. Them. We have about 5 minutes ago. So
Oh, okay.
we run about an hour, but I actually lost track of time, to be honest with you.
Oh no,
I'm
it's
enjoying
a
the
great
conversation.
I have time if you do. I mean,
Yeah.
just for one more question and a quick,
Yeah. So I guess the final question would be, what is the number of people that come to you just looking for therapy, opposed to people coming to you looking for therapy through games? And you're
I'm
muted.
sorry. There we go. Yeah, I did button on my mic. Most of the folks that come to us, honestly, come to us for skill building. I think that there's still a lot to be done with the heavy therapy aspects of it. Most of the folks that we support are kids and teens on the autism spectrum, or kids with some social skills challenges. So most of what we do focuses kind of on those areas. A lot of parents call and like, my child has, some trouble getting along with peers, and, they really kind of isolate themselves. Like even before COVID, they kind of do that. So we're kind of looking for this game as a way to help them kind of get out there and to do more with friends. We've typically, that's kind of most of what we see with kids. Or my child is ADHD, or my child's a little hyper, so he needs how to like learn to act in a group. Most of that's kind of what we get. We have had some interest in adult groups where, people are like, I had trauma in my life and I play my character as who I was when I was 17, but I want to play it a little different now. So we've had people work through trauma during the session, but I'd say predominantly people come for autism support and social skills supports, maybe some emotional management, emotional recognition. So we might, create emotional scenes to kind of, recognize when someone's mad and how they work through anger or something of that sort.
So you're getting traditional clinical patients, and then you're just like, well, we had this way of doing it then.
Yeah, we haven't really had anybody. Probably the most unique opportunity we had was the one I talked about earlier, which is we've been offering what we were calling like COVID relief groups for students of a local college. We were running predominantly recreational D&D for them. But again, and this is the weirdness of all of it. So as we're like running this, it's a school for like creative people, like artists, designers, things of that nature. And as we're playing through the game, we send back feedback because we want the university to know that, they're paying us for this was worthwhile. And a lot of the students are like, well, it really helped me understand my conceptualization of character when I go to do their art design. And I was like, wow. Like, so by playing D&D, they had a better understanding of how to portray a character, not just visually, but how to like get inside the head of the character when you're doing graphic design work. And I was like, so there's a little skill building opportunity here that maybe we can offer this to, students in art to kind of then make it more character portrayal and character motivation. There's another area. Now it helped in other ways with like, the isolation and people being, connected with others. So there's a ton of applications to it. I think that we're just always very careful before we go into an area that might be problematic, to just talk with other professionals and make sure that, again, do we have the clinical chops to handle what we want to handle using the game? Because if we don't, then that's not a client that we can support or that we should support, because that's just smart therapy, and it's also ethical and respectful to the client, but I think overall to the process as well. There's a lot it can do, but no one thing can do everything, and we just have to be smart about it.
At the end of the day, it's about helping the client and not playing games.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah.
That's why someone like you is doing this and not me. Like, we started Nerdarchy as this scam to convince our wives and significant others that that we were working when we're actually playing games. So
No, I'm not just spending time talking about D&D and RPG. What are you talking about?
it's work. It's work.
Yes, it's work. It's hard work.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to thank you for coming on. It's been great chatting with you and catching up. And as always, folks, in the description, there's a ton of links. Start clicking away. Follow Jack. You know, it's a great cause that you're involved with, and the work you're doing is awesome. After this isn't live anymore, it'll also be in the pinned comment. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I mean, just one quick thing to mention. If anybody out there who has a gaming group and would love to support the Bodhana Group, we do have a Tiltify page that you can kind of create your own team and fundraise for us. So if you do like any like live stream or you run like a day event or something, you can create your own team and all proceeds go directly to our programs. Our goal is to run groups for kids and teens at low to no cost for families. So if I can pay my facilitators, I know I ain't going to make millions doing this. So we're doing it for the common good. So if you want to help out, just go to our website that I know is in the link and check out how to sign on as a Tiltify member to run your own team.
Awesome. Sounds great. And until next time, stay nerdy.